All right, we're going to look at some challenge problems with these adding and subtracting mixed numbers because this time you're going to be regrouping. And so this is when you get into IXL and you get into those high SMART score numbers like in the 80s and 90s, you'll start seeing some of these problems. I'm going to walk you through how to solve them, but they get pretty tricky. All right, so for the first one we're looking at is a subtraction problem, and we've got a whole number minus a mixed number. And here's what's tricky about this. You can subtract the whole numbers, but there's no fraction here to subtract 9/10. So if you think of it as 0 fraction minus 9/10, you can't solve that. You can't do it. So it gets a little bit complicated, and there's a few more steps to this. We've got to take this 7 whole and decompose it so it has a fraction. And I'm going to break it down. We're going to pull a fraction out of this, and I'm going to pull 10/10 out of this. That's 1 whole, and now it's a fraction. And if that's 1 whole, there would be 6 whole left. So I'm going to break 7 down into 6 whole and 10/10. Now I can actually subtract 5 whole and 9/10. Think of it as subtraction when you're regrouping with subtraction, and that's a skill we worked all the way back, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, beginning of the year, this year. We're really regrouping this 7. So we're crossing it off. We're borrowing from that 1 7 and leaving it a 6, and we're making that 1 into a fraction. So we have something to take this 9/10 away from. Now that I have rewritten this 7 into 6 whole and 10/10, which is still 7, I can subtract these. And I'm going to go whole number minus whole number, which is 1, and then fraction minus fraction. So 10/10 minus 9/10 is 1/10. Not so bad. You just got to think about regrouping or decomposing that 7 into parts so you have something to take that fraction away from. Let's take a look at a few more. All right, this one's an addition one. Not the same as the subtraction regrouping. You'll see our changing of our answer more and simplifying when we get to the end of it here. But there's no whole number, nothing plus 3. That's pretty simple, 3. And then our fractions, we've got a common denominator, which makes it nice, so that 8's going to stay on the bottom. And then 4 plus 5 is 9. Here's what's tricky about this. This is improper. You can't have a whole number and an improper fraction mixed together. We've got to switch this improper into a mixed number. Watch what happens with that 9/8. I'm going to decompose it into 8/8 and 1/8. Because I know when I put 8/8 and 1/8 back together, I get 9/8. I also know that 8/8 is 1 whole. So I had 3 whole, but I'm going to add 1 whole more, which makes it 4 whole. And then I still have that 1/8. So it gets a little complicated in that improper fraction. I've got to break it down and add that 1 whole to my 3 whole I already had to make 4 whole and my 1/8. Let's look at another addition one. So let's look at the whole number, 4 plus 0, pretty darn simple, 4 whole. Then we look at the fraction 2/3 plus 2/3. That's going to be 4/3. And there we are stuck again with that improper fraction. We've got to simplify it or write it a little bit easier. So I'm gonna decompose this one again into 3/3 because that's the 1 whole, and 1/3. Excuse me. I got the 3/3 because I know if the denominator's 3, the numerator's 3, that's 1 whole. So I pulled out 1 whole. And I got the 1/3 because I know 3/3 plus 1/3 will make up that 4/3. Please remember you also have that 4 whole you already had in here. So now you've got 4 whole, plus 1 more, because 3/3 is really 1 whole. That would make 5 whole total and 1/3. Here's a subtraction one. Again, I've got a whole number minus a mixed number. And I can't do, because I have no fraction, I can't do 0 minus 1/4. So I have to borrow from that 5. And I'm going to turn that 5 into 4 whole. I'm going to take that 1 whole and make it into a fraction. So I broke 5 into 4 whole and 1 more over here, but as a fraction. Now I can easily subtract 3 1/4. Whole numbers first. 4 minus 3 is 1, and 4/4 minus 1/4 is 3/4. Here's another one, a little bit trickier. It's not a whole number, it's a mixed number. But if I look at this, I can do 3 minus 2, but I can't do 1/3 minus 2/3. I'm going to write that separately on top here. I can't do the fraction portion of this because I'm going to keep my common denominator here. I can't do 1 minus 2. Can't do it. I'm going to have to borrow or regroup or decompose, there's lots of ways to call it, to get that 1/3. This needs to be a bigger fraction than this one does. Just like when we're subtracting, the top number needs to be bigger than the smaller one. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to have to break this 3 whole down into 2 whole and 3/3. Because this is 1 whole, and because I want them to have a common denominator, I really still have 3, but I just broke it down into those 2 pieces. Here's the difference. I already had 1/3. So to decompose this or regroup this number, if I look at it, I have 2 whole, and 3/3 plus 1/3 make 4/3. And in this case, it's okay to have that improper fraction with my number, with my mixed number, because I still have to subtract, and I have to subtract 2 whole and 2/3. So once I've got this set up and I have a bigger fraction in front and a smaller fraction behind it, I can subtract those. And of course I'm starting with that whole number. 2 minus 2 is 0, and 4/3 minus 2/3 is 2/3. You can see how this gets pretty complicated. Let's try another. All right, 4 3/5 minus 3 4/5. Whole numbers I'm fine. I can do 4 minus 3. But where I get stuck is 3/5 minus 4/5. I can't do 3 minus 4. I'm going to have to borrow, regroup, decompose that 4. Got to break it into pieces. I need a bigger fraction here in that 3/5. So I'm going to break that 4 into 3 whole. I'm going to pull a whole fraction out. In this case, it's going to be 5/5. Because I want that denominator to stay the same, I'm picking 5/5. I know 5 out of 5 is 1 whole. I already had 3/5 there. So now I broke that 4 down into 3 whole and 1 as a fraction. I'm going to add those fractions together. Adding fractions pretty simple. I get 8/5. So now I have 3 whole and 8/5. Now I can subtract 3 whole and 4/5. And 3 minus 3 is 0, and 8/5 minus 4/5 is 4/5. And there's my final answer. One more to look at. Here is 6 1/4, and we're going to subtract 3 3/4. Again, my whole number's fine. I can do that, but I can't do this fraction. It's a smaller fraction. I need it to be a bigger fraction, so I'm going to borrow from the 6, if you will. I'm going to regroup it down into 5 whole, and the whole fraction I'm pulling out is 4/4. Again, keeping with that common denominator. So I'm breaking this 6 down into 2 pieces, 5 and 1. 1 is a fraction. I'm going to add my fractions together, so I am going to end up with an improper fraction here, and that's perfectly fine because it's not our final answer. We don't need to simplify it yet. And then I can simply subtract the 3 3/4, starting with my whole number. 5 minus 3 is 2, and 5/4 minus 3/4 is 2/4. These are challenging problems, guys. Give them a try if you want. You'll only see a few of them in the IXL pretty much a SMART score of 80 or above.